There is a certain kind of person who moves through the world quietly, someone who listens more than they speak, someone who notices the tremor behind another's smile, who hears the meaning tucked between unfinished sentences, who senses the tension carried inside small, invisible pauses. People call them understanding, calm, wise, reliable, the one who always gets it. But beneath that soft exterior, there is a heaviness rarely seen, a private landscape that almost no one asks about. Because when a person understands everything, others assume they don't need to be understood in return. And that assumption has consequences. It usually starts early. A child who reads the room before they read a book. A mind that notices emotional temperature. The way others notice the weather. They learn that harmony can be preserved if they anticipate what others feel before those feelings even surface. They grow up being praised for their maturity, their patience, their emotional intelligence. But something else grows quietly in the background. A belief that their role is to hold the pieces together, to absorb the tension, to soften the edges, to be the landing place for the storms of other people. And soon understanding becomes less of a gift and more of an expectation, an obligation, a silent job description nobody wrote, yet everyone relies on. Root cause. At its core, the need to understand everything often comes from a childhood where unpredictability was normal. Maybe there was conflict or emotional inconsistency, or simply a parent whose inner world was too heavy for a child to ignore. Some children become loud, others shut down, but a rare few become highly attuned observers. They scan for signs. They track shifts in tone. They learn the early warning signals of disappointment, anger, sadness. Understanding becomes a survival strategy. And over time, it becomes part of who they are, not because they chose it, but because their nervous system adapted to it. Being understanding kept them safe. It made life more predictable. It reduced conflict. It secured affection. It created order in moments that felt chaotic. And so the pattern follows them into school, into friendships, into adulthood. Always the one who listens, the one who gives grace, the one who holds space, but rarely the one who receives it. Psychologists call this pattern hyperempathy, a state where a person's brain becomes wired to rapidly decode emotional cues. It can develop through temperament, but often through environment. Neuroscience shows that chronic emotional monitoring strengthens certain networks in the brain, those responsible for prediction, attunement, and social mapping. People who grew up like this don't just understand others logically, they feel others, sometimes too deeply. And attachment theory adds another layer. Those who learned that peace depended on their ability to understand and adapt often become what researchers call compulsive caregivers, people who feel responsible for the emotional equilibrium of their relationships, not consciously, not intentionally, but automatically. It looks noble, it feels generous, it appears wise, yet psychologically it can be exhausting. Because when someone understands everything, the world starts giving them more than they can actually hold. There's a strange internal tension that builds over time. A part of them wants to be understood too, to be seen, to be asked about, to simply exist without interpreting the world every second. But another part resists, a voice that whispers, "Don't burden anyone. Stay composed. Be the strong one. Your feelings will only complicate things." So they stay quiet. They stay accommodating. They stay endlessly understanding. And slowly something inside begins to ache. Not in dramatic ways, not in explosive outbursts, but in the quiet moments when they realize that almost no one asks how they feel, that the people they support rarely offer the same depth in return, that they've become the emotional anchor for everyone around them, yet remain unanchored themselves. The conflict grows even sharper when they try to open up, and others respond with surprise or discomfort or distance. Because the world isn't used to seeing the one who understands everything finally reveal the weight they carry, so they retreat. They reassure themselves that it's fine. They tell themselves they don't need much. They shrink their desires to make space for others, and the cycle continues. But eventually something shifts, not always through conflict, sometimes through fatigue, sometimes through a slow unraveling, sometimes simply through observation. They begin to see a pattern where they give endlessly, yet feel strangely unknown, where they comfort everyone, but have no memory of the last time someone comforted them. And this realization can feel frightening because it challenges the very identity they've relied on for years. Understanding everything gave them purpose, it gave them structure, it protected them, but it also limited them. They start to understand that empathy without reciprocity turns into depletion, that compassion without boundaries becomes self-erasure, that holding emotional space for others doesn't mean they must surrender their own emotional world. The shift is subtle but undeniable, a recognition that being the one who understands everything does not mean being the one who must carry everything. Healing for someone like this is rarely loud. It's not a declaration, not a sudden transformation. It is a slow learning that their inner world deserves the same curiosity they offer to others. It is the quiet practice of allowing confusion without immediately solving it, feeling discomfort without swallowing it, letting their own emotions surface without labeling them as too much. Healing also means noticing the relationships that nourish them rather than drain them, the people who ask instead of only receiving, the rare individuals who sense their silence and gently invite them to speak. And perhaps most importantly, healing means releasing the belief that their worth lies in their understanding. Some things are allowed to be unclear. Some moments are allowed to be messy. Some emotions deserve to be felt. Rather than translated, they learn to hold themselves with the same tenderness they've always offered others. Not perfectly, not consistently, but slowly, humanly, authentically. In the end, the dark side of being the one who understands everything is not the understanding itself. It is the loneliness that forms when no one thinks to turn toward them with the same softness. But there is beauty in recognizing this truth, because once they see the weight they carry, they can choose differently. They can choose balance. They can choose reciprocity. They can choose relationships that understand them too. And gradually they discover something unexpected. Understanding is not a burden. When it is shared, when it flows both ways, when it becomes a meeting place instead of a role, they remain insightful, empathetic, gentle. But now that they are also seen, not just for what they give, but for who they are, and that is when understanding finally becomes freedom instead of responsibility.